This series of talks aims to delve into Sriaurobindo's profound insight. Spirituality is indeed the master key of the Indian mind. Featuring a diverse range of speakers who have extensively researched this topic, the series will explore the manifestation of spirituality across various fields of life. A new talk will be released every third Saturday. This week's guest speaker is Sri Ramachandra Roddam, an ardent admirer of Sri Aurobindo and the trustee and administrator of Ekatara Kalari, Sanatan Siddhashram in Kolkata. He holds a management degree from the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning and has been significantly influenced by Sri Aurobindo's writings in his spiritual journey. With over a decade of experience in the social development sector, focusing on education, health, and environment, he currently serves at Sanatan Siddhashram, a traditional gurukul for the ancient Baul tradition of Bengal. He is the author of Devi Bhakti Tarangini, a collection of 20 devotional poems dedicated to the Supreme Goddess. Additionally, he is an invited faculty member who teaches Indian spirituality, yoga, and sadhana and contributes to the field through his writings on Adhyatma.
Pranams to everyone. I offer my prayers and salutations at the feet of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. I offer my prayers to all the Guru Mandala, the Gurus who guide and inspire. And I offer my prayers to the Divine Mother, Bhagavati. And since it's Sri Aurobindo, I would like to invoke the presence of Ma Durga. And because there is a deep connection in that regard. I pray to them that may this sharing and reflections that I am going to present today, may it be blessed and guided by them. May it be lifted by their divine inspiration. So, when I had an opportunity to present something on Sri Aurobindo's thoughts, the topic was very wide. I think Bharatiya spiritual mind and its importance in trying to address the challenges, the transformations ahead, and the possibilities ahead for us as a society, as a humanity, as a whole. The presentation is going to be more in the nature of a lecture and more in the nature of reflections. I'll just give you a brief background about myself so that you understand where I'm coming from. The topic that I had indicated that for this particular lecture was spiritual transformation of meta-crisis and the need for Sri Aurobindo's integral vision. This is what I wanted to share today. So please keep that subject in your mind and those important keywords: meta-crisis, transformation, and Sri Aurobindo's integral vision. And we will dwell, and these words would lead our reflection in the lecture today. Just a little bit about myself, and I come my spiritual anchor and basis is from Sri Sathya Sai Baba's community, and Sri Sathya Sai Baba is my Param Guru. However, I've had a very, I think, relatively an early exposure to Sri Aurobindo's works, and even almost as a teenager, around the age of 19 or 20, is when I discovered Sri Aurobindo. It would be usually considered a bit overwhelming, his thoughts, and because they can be considered very dense and very complex and all of that. But I kept reading essays on Gita, one of his seminal works, and I would say by sheer grace, the lock of the door to the wisdom of Sri Aurobindo opened from the other side, and I would see that it is grace of Mother and Sri Aurobindo that has enabled this. And ever since, for more than now 2 decades, uh, reading Sri Aurobindo uh, has never been an academic pursuit for me. It was always a swadhyaya. It was kind of self-finding, a process of constant self-finding, self-culturing, bringing clarity into the inner space and the inner journey, and then of course the kind of the wide spectrum of topics that he unfurls for us. It is sheer delight to traverse the contours of consciousness along with Sri Aurobindo. And that I think that is the most enriching aspect. Uh, so that way, Sri Aurobindo's thoughts, words, and wisdom have been a profound guidance in my life for over 2 decades. Um, and relevance of those thoughts and those spectrum of ideas in the current context that we are going to talk about, that I will come to in a moment. And yet another important association. Where am I right now? Where am I sitting? I need to share with you a bit. It is this space is this is a sacred space, a gurukula called Sanatana Siddhashram. It is based out from West Bengal, so that's yet another Sri Aurobindo's connection there. It is essentially a gurukula, a learning center dedicated for ancient Baul tradition. It's a yoga bhakti tradition which has its expression in the form of the song and the poetry that is arising from the heart of the spiritual masters who have been doing yoga and the bhakti sadhana uh, over hundreds of years in this part of the land. And it is a very importantly, it is an exceptionally unique tradition in the sense its confluence of several yogic paths, be it hatha yoga, be it yoga of say Vedantic vision, as well as bhakti movement or bhakti path or the bhakti yoga that emerges here uniquely under the aegis of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is very, very highly revered, though not very popularly known. And in the current circumstances, it is only misperceived as a folk tradition with folk songs. That is how even Bengalis often kind of relegate it, to by losing its essence. It's cold winter, so please excuse me for me drinking some hot water or tea time to time. So that's the context where I'm talking from, and this ashram is founded and led by Parvati Ma, or we would call Ma Parvati Baul. She is been on this path in the traditional Guru Shishya Parampara for more than 3 decades and has been spreading the message of the message and the wisdom of the path, the ancient path, and the masters. Now to the topic. So the topic, as I said, is articulated as spiritual transformation of meta-crisis, need for Sri Aurobindo's integral vision. So it becomes obviously essential to discuss the topic, the word, the meta-crisis itself, so that we contextualize it. So I asked, nowadays it's now even more easy, even more than Googling. We have now artificial intelligence tools. So I asked one of the artificial intelligence tools, what is the definition of meta-crisis? And So please bear with me as I read out a few sentences as I have received it from one of the artificial intelligence tools, and which is fairly well defined in my view. The term meta-crisis refers to a systemic crisis that transcends the sum of its individual crises. It's more than just a collection of problems. It's an emergent property that arises from the interconnectedness and amplification of those problems. Here are some key aspects of the meta crisis. A, it is systemic. The meta crisis isn't about isolated issues, but about breakdown of entire systems, like the environment, economy, and social structures. It is interconnected. So, individual crises like climate change, economic inequality, and political polarization are deeply intertwined and exacerbate each other. Emergent, it is also emergent. The meta crisis is a new phenomena that arises from the complex interactions of these interconnected crises. It's a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. So, what they're trying to say is that there are a lot of problems, uh, but what is meta crisis is problem of all problems put together. So, therefore, it is always bigger than each of those individual problems. So, meta crisis is interconnected. Its individual crises like climate change, economic inequality, and political polarization are deeply intertwined and exacerbate each other. Uh, it is emergent. Meta crisis is a new phenomenon. That's what at least the current scholarship says. Uh, that this arises from the complex interactions of these interconnected crises. It's a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. So, as a whole, um, like each problem is there is an economic crisis, environmental crisis, technological crisis, or the challenges that the new technologies and the shifting technologies are bringing to the fore. And there is mental health crisis, there is a crisis of the well-being, then there is a crisis of um, all forms and nature in terms of so crisis, a lot of crisis, but it's meta crisis that put together. They say it's quite a recent, uh, it's an emergent view, or say it's a relatively new view of looking at things, which I would not agree, given we have been always bolstered by the Sanatana Dharma view of understanding the crisis in this multidimensional ways, which I will just touch upon. Um, then I think this is very beautiful. It comes to the point of crisis of meaning. So at its core, what is actually causing this? And at its core, the meta crisis is crisis of purpose and meaning. And it challenges our existing worldviews and calls for a fundamental rethinking of our values, priorities, and how we relate to each other and the planet. Now, planetary consciousness, understanding yourself to be connected to the planet, is what um, is at the center of its contemplation, right? So, if you were to tell, you know what, I'm from a modern technological or scientific perspective, if you were to tell, oh well, we have to be interplanetary and we have to just move out from here, like how Elon Musk would say, that is not very pleasing solution, because meta crisis is, or the definition of meta crisis is demanding our meaningful engagement in bringing forth um, resolutions, solutions, way forward, reconciliations, and more importantly, sort of healing for all that we have put ourselves along with our ecosystem and the planet through. Yes, so as we were discussing meta crisis, I had a lot of technological crisis here, so please bear with me.
you would be seeing some changes in the quality of the device that we are using, and I think the teams would take care of it. So yeah, so essentially this is how kind of the meta crisis is being defined. So it is interdependent. It is kind of an accumulation of many crises together, and but the crisis which is whole is always greater than its parts. So there is this dimension of parts and whole. There is interdependency and interconnectedness, and the way the current scholarship is defining is it's emergent, it's relatively new. Why they would call it new is something that we will try to address it. But from our perspective, so if you were to look at, there is a psychological crisis, there is mental health crisis, there is spiritual crisis, there is economic crisis, there is environmental crisis, there is governance, there is technological crisis, and all of this put together. And recently, just yesterday I was watching on X or Twitter, the earlier Twitter, and in one of the conferences, Elon Musk just gets up, from his seat, and he says, when we get up every day in the morning, we have such a big set of information about the bad news. All the time we hear crisis, all the time there is only bad news, there is poverty, there is crime, there is war, there is corruption, there is so much so that if the humans are uh, um, made to dedicate only to finding the solutions for the crisis that are incessant and uninterrupted, and there is no end to the crisis, then there is no other purpose. There is no purpose for growth, there is no purpose for progress, there is no purpose for going forward. And then he comes up with this statement saying that one of his famous scientists, or the rocket scientist from Russia, had once called Earth as a planet, as a cradle for human civilization. And then Elon Musk goes on to say that, but we are not meant to stay in the cradle all the time. We are meant to grow out of it. And we are meant to be adults. We are meant to progress. And this is his version of contextualizing interplanetary, ambitions that he has. And, one of the other things that he articulates, why I'm talking about him specifically, is he's one of the leading thinkers right now, or the influencers, so to say, who himself has obviously gathered his knowledge by reading various influential thinkers. So this is his way of saying that the earth is going to be very finite. At the end of the day, the resources are not going to be available. Is it, whether it is because of some sort of an exhaustion of the resources that we are going to indulge in as our population growth or whatever that happens, or it could even be some kind of a crisis which is not predictable, a meteor coming and probably colliding, or something else coming and just causing a mayhem, which is of a very, very cataclysmic nature, probably like the old time asteroids have wiped out species, or there are many, many, many theories, or there could be a phenomenal amount of natural calamities. Now, this is one way of articulating crisis which is beyond your control. No matter how well prepared you are, there is something that is beyond your control. Well, our philosophy has called it, or Sanatana Dharma has called it for millennia. This is something called as Adi Bhautika. Means you are, it is called as Adi Daivika. In a way, so this is a crisis. The problem is, when we call these are three forms of inflammation, or three tapa. As an individual, we feel three kinds of restless states, or constant crisis that we experience. Let me put it that way. And one is that of Adi Bhautika, which is extremely Bhautika, that is elemental in nature, that we as a body, we are embodied beings, and so this is elemental in nature, and the challenges that we receive, it could be illness, it could be material prosperity, because it's again everything is related with the matter is bhautika means five elemental and sensorial in nature, so the challenges that surround us are of this nature. And then there could be challenges which are adidevika, which is the forces which are way beyond your zone of influence. A tsunami happens, what would you do? It is not something that is very much within your zone of influence. And Adi Bhautika, at least you get a sense that okay, there is a healing process that's possible. If there is an illness, I take a medicine. If there is some other crisis which is very material in nature, I am running out of the funds, so I might go and get a loan, or go to the friends and try to bring stuff that would help me in my sustenance and livelihood, etc., etc. But Adi Devika, what would you do? There is right now, as we are discussing, there is wildfires which are wiping out one of the most prosperous nations and probably the richest state of that nation, which is California. And in Los Angeles, there is these wildfires which are wiping out houses, and it is Adi Devika in nature. So the elemental forces are doing their death dance at this point in time, and the people who are suffering do not have a way out of this. And not only that, connect. So it's not in silos. So there is this Adi Bhautika and Adi Devika, they are happening in their own way, but they are so deeply interconnected. When this elemental crisis is happening, you are listening to more and more stories from an economic perspective. The insurers are not insuring for this disaster, and they are probably canceling many insurances, and so there are people who are losing their properties and probably decades of their houses where they were living in, and yet you do not have respite at your own personal material level of any sort of reconciliation. And this probably can, to some of them who are going through this crisis, can hit so hard that it can be very existential question that what the hell is life, or what this fire is about in life. And so there is this existential question, what is this suffering, what is it? It's almost like Buddha, who has confronted the pain and the suffering and wanted to find solution for it, and where does this arise from. And that's how he sets forth for his seeking. But this is not one time affair that somebody back in the millennia has resolved this issue. And but yes, a wisdom path has been given to us, but we as embodied beings are subject to this kind of crisis again and again, time and again. So this kind of an existential question, this kind of an existential crisis is what is defined as adhyatmika. And where you are pondering on very phenomenally from the connection of the phenomenal crisis that is happening to the foundations of your own existence, your own identity, your own astitva. So all this is happening. So these are all interconnected, so beautifully interconnected. And so this interconnectedness is called meta. So this is what is meta crisis, if you want. We called it Tritapa. That is only one way, because ours is a very ancient millennial old philosophy. We have many ways of defining this aspect of dukkha, crisis. What does it mean in terms of what kind of transformation potential it holds within? Why does it happen in an individual's life or a collective life? So all this. So we have this way of looking at it. So therefore, I do not subscribe to the part that, okay, this is only new and emerging. However, if you were to look at it, it can be said that humanity is at a cusp right now of both in terms of accumulation of knowledge, right? So from a linear time perspective, let's say at various points in time, we have various wisdom traditions, various knowledge systems, various ways. And let's take Bharata or the India itself as an example. And you have all of this, various ways of various darshanas that were emerging and getting popular, like the Vedanta and Mimamsa and Yoga Darshana and Sankhya Darshana. And the way, so Darshana is essentially the way you are looking at life, the philosophizing of life and contextualizing it, understanding ontology of it, as well as epistemic, the knowledge system. How are you looking at it? How are you deriving knowledge out of it? What is the means of deriving of knowledge, whether it is only sensorial and data driven, or is it something that inferential in nature, or whether it is an existential wisdom which is there within you that is flowering, right? And all of this is there. But we have had this straddling of wisdom, across the traditions. But so do we have the straddling of the challenges and the problems, at various points in time. When the societies aspired and have an ambition of and set their own goals of what an ideal society would look like in terms of the collective, they wanted to actualize and embody all this wisdom in some form or the other. And in the process, there was partial success. In the process, there were also hurdles and challenges. And we have also a tremendous amount of problems that would have crept in the process. So we, at this point in time where we are standing as humanity, we are not only inheriting the complexity of the wisdom and all that was there, because you can now look at various cultures. It's because of interconnectedness through technology and all of that. You would also know how the other cultures were, looking at life all this while, and their own journey, our own journey from, say, Bharatiya perspective, like this. So we have an accumulated knowledge which we have inherited, and we also have accumulated problems and challenges which we have inherited. And again, these problems and the knowledge can be looked at as psychological, environmental wisdom, governance crisis, technological crisis, economic crisis. No, you just take it, and then we can also kind of slice them in this way. But we have accumulated all of this now where we stand. So that's why whenever the definition of growth is articulated in a very, very monotone or a monochrome way, that, okay, this is nothing but efflorescence, blossoming of inner wisdom, and this is the positive articulation which we do all the time, about the growth, more sophistication in our living approach, more sensitivity, and more, and the kind of symbolism what we also have of the growth is always like a flower blossoming and the sun coming up in the skies, and which is all very good in a way, very, very profound, no doubt. But at the same time, what we should also understand is that it's not only our light that is growing from strength to strength, but our shadow and the darkness too, is getting deeper and deeper. And not only it's the blossoming of the flower that is shaping up, but right beneath the flower there are thorns. There is a stem, there is a leaf, and all of that is coming from the same soil and the same root. Right? So all of this is also growing. So most often what happens, even when we look at it from mental health perspective, that we have these thorns which we do not conceptualize as part of our growth, but they are also getting stronger and stronger, and at some point in time they start pricking. And that's when you realize, oh, there is a thorn in your own personality. And it starts pricking not only you, but it might be starting to prick your dear ones and the close set of people. So, but that is also aspect of growth of the flower, of the thorn, which is part of the system of the plant. So we have accumulated knowledge, we have accumulated challenges, we have accumulated problems. So we are standing, it appears right now, at a cusp where there is this inherent force from all the inheritance what we have had, which from a Sanatana Dharma perspective, it's fairly simple to use most profound word, karma. Karma is nothing but there is an action of whatever nature from the past, and there are consequences and the accumulation of the consequences and the time when it is appropriate for the ripening of the consequences to be experienced by us. So this also, for us, when we say meta-crisis, is that now we have come as a humanity to a point where all these various strands of knowledge and wisdom and the challenges that we have as a humanity from our own growth and development perspective are now for the first time experiencing this in its accumulation. Well, again, it's not first time when we have to look at it from our Sanatana Dharmic perspective, because we have this notion of karma inbuilt into our system very, very strongly. Why I'm making these points of Tritapa, say Adi Bhautika, Adi Devika, Adhyatmika, and say the karma aspect, is because these are very profound aspects how this needs to be applied to this increasing awareness about, say, meta-crisis, right? And the way we are articulating. So I'm spending substantial time on this aspect, and much of it, what I'm articulating, though I'm not using the word Sri Aurobindo's writings and all of that, I feel it is his vision, that is very much present in the way we are kind of uncovering these subjects. So now we have this entire meta-crisis. We are looking at it from parts and whole. Very good. We are also looking at it from interdependency, how it is interconnected. We are also looking at it from our own vision of Tritapa, that is the three inflammations of Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivika, and Adhyatmika. We are also looking at it from karmic perspective. So this interdependency, parts and whole, and all of this in the current articulation is pretty strong. It is not easy for the yet a perspective, the currently emerging perspectives, to look at it from the karmic angle, and or looking at it from the crisis as defined by us, in terms of the Tritapa. This is where the word integral, which avoids the karmic view, or which avoids this aspect of looking at it, the interconnectedness of Adi Bhautika, Adi Devika, and Adhyatmika. This is not truly meta still, if you are not bringing this articulation into the picture. And also, when Sri Aurobindo uses the word integral, and when we see the definition of the meta-crisis, it is as if there is a crisis in the center. Like, if I were to use the palm, there is a crisis in the center. There is some spiritual crisis happening, and it's contributing to some kind of a crisis, to the crisis. There is governance crisis happening that's contributing to the crisis. Technological crisis is happening, and it's contributing to the crisis. Environmental crisis is contributing and causing some, problem. And psychological and mental health issues, and all of this is causing all of this. So it's like some sort of a flat, structure of interdependency, or this is also causing. So let's look at it systemically. But when you look at the systemic is like flat, right? There is no depth to it. There is no hierarchy to it, because the moment you kind of want to emphasize one crisis is more foundational than the other, then it becomes problematic for a modern view, because we are like no hierarchy kind of a business we are in right now. But in the definition of the meta-crisis, it comes fundamentally to the lack of purpose and lack of meaning. It is sense-making, it is meaning that we are searching for in this crisis. And this is where it becomes extremely important to have a look at this crisis, not only from the interdependency perspective, not only looking at it as the parts and the whole perspective, and the systemic perspective. Therefore, we have to look at it from this Adi Devika, Adi Bhautika, and Adhyatmika, that is again interconnected perspective, as well as the karmic perspective. But more importantly, also Sri Aurobindo brings these two aspects which define his integral view. His way of looking at the meta aspect of it is there is an inner and the outer aspect, which can be loosely called subjective and objective. But there is an inner dimension to the whole of life. And there is also an outer dimension, the outer perspective. the outer forms, outer systems, outer processes, outer expressions versus inner inspirations, ideas, and more soul centric definition of the inner. This is what is spiritual. Right? And more profoundly, Sri Aurobindo unambiguously brings a perspective of higher and lower. Right? Because this sort of interconnectedness definition is still very much grounded scientifically in making the matter the sum substratum, not the consciousness. Though a lot of scientific studies are coming closer and closer to investigating the aspect of consciousness, but yet sum total of these definitions have to always be validated by the prevalent scientific perspective of looking at how all of this is being mounted materially, right? So it is therefore brain, which is the foundations of consciousness, and planet, which is the measure for talking about life as a whole. If you are not going to talk about brain as the foundational aspect, you are not going to talk about the planet as the the material basis on which we are discussing all these crises, then immediately you will be shut off, and to not engage in this conversation. You will be out, because the materiality is the foundation of this discourse of meta-crisis. This is because, as opposed to the ancient wisdom traditions, which had the sacrality, the sacred at its center, to make meaning of everything, the spiritual at its core, to mount the whole of the complexity of life, that has been thrown out. The life has been desacralized, constantly. And yet all our crisis is defined in this way. Therefore, it becomes very difficult for us to accept this inner and outer dimension. At the best, we can accept the inner aspect from the perspective of psychology, mental health, and maximum we can articulate consciousness within those domains, right? But when Sri Aurobindo mounts it, he mounts it very clearly higher and lower. And there is a clear vision that material can be adhara, sure, but in the spectrum of the consciousness, you have the ancient Vedic vision of Bhur Bhuvas Suvaha. So there are several realms, that you are part of that interconnectedness. You are not a human who is living in isolation of your own fanciful isolation of habitat of planet. So this vision opening to the subtle forces that shape our life and circumstances here, which the ancient sacred wisdom traditions naturally held it as an intuitive strength, but that has been now thrown out. But that doesn't, it's unlikely to get its way back into the current definitions of the meta-crisis, because it's unacceptable because of various preoccupations and prejudices against the religious perspective and the wisdom. But of all these interdependent crises, there is a religious crisis too. It's important, but it's only one of the crises. So, but if Sri Aurobindo were to mount this, he would obviously place the spiritual crisis as the most foundational crisis, in which you will have to address and resolve articulate your problems from that perspective, and resolve your issues and provide solutions from that perspective. And then the hierarchy begins, and then it can go to culture, then it can go to religion, then it can go to politics, policy making, and then the material well-being and economic well-being. So this is a traditional view, or it's not only a traditional view, it is an ancient wisdom view. This is what even the integral vision of Sri Aurobindo would look at it. Uh, because Adhyatmikata has to be the basis on which you are deriving your dharmic or religious life, on which you are deriving further your meaning of collective existence as a culture and society, and from there you are further deriving your clarity to live as a society with a material prosperity in terms of economically, and your governance and policy making is deriving from there, and from policy and governance, policy making and governance, you have your economic prosperity coming, that is going to take care of environment and all of this. But right now we have a reverse situation, that we articulate this crisis in a way and trying to find solutions economically or something. So now even the Western thinkers have figured out it's not working out that way. It's not working, this kind of an approach of reversal of trying to fix capitalism or socialism and then trying to find a solution accordingly. How do we have a suitable governance structures that allow for this, and then trying to find suitable cultures, and therefore if cultures from the ancient wisdom traditions are still existent and they are only problems now, so wipe that clean ground and then go more and more, and then try to define even spirituality as subservient to uh, this reversal of the outlook. And a spirituality that is coming out of such a scenario is very, very shallow in nature. So well, this I have spent like substantial time in trying to articulate this, and but I would like to quickly give some examples, in order to see how this can be articulated from Sri Aurobindo's perspective, because without clear examples, um, this will all be still very abstract theorizing, right? So we have to see when Sri Aurobindo applies his integral view, to these problems, how does he articulate. And what I'm going to take you through quickly is I'm going to take some sort of a problem. Why I will say Sri Aurobindo is integral? Let me say why. There are many ways to define this word integral, even in Sri Aurobindo's context. Ontologically or individually, when you're looking at you have a physical basis, which is Annamaya Kosha, then you have Pranamaya Kosha, then you have Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha from an ancient time, and Sri Aurobindo defines this as planes of existence, which is the material plane, and then you have physical plane, physical material plane, then you have vital, where the life or the pranic force comes into picture, then you have higher vital, then you have mental, and then you have higher mental, and then so that this kind of hierarchical mounting of the being, Sri Aurobindo articulates very much on the basis of ancient Sanatana Dharma wisdom, but he is now speaking to the modern mind at the same time. So whenever Sri Aurobindo is talking about anything, I would say it's integral, because his vision is constantly scanning all these aspects, both individual and collective aspects of a problem. It is also constantly scanning these various layers of and planes of existence, how this problem is manifesting in that. And he is also constantly looking at articulating a spiritual perspective to it, and how to effect a transformation or overcome this challenge from an inside out rather than from outside in. And all of this comes across very vividly in Sri Aurobindo's articulation of things. And Sri Aurobindo has written this book called Human Cycle, Human Unity. This articulates very beautifully about systems and processes as well, and collectives. Otherwise, we would know Sri Aurobindo's work more popularly from the yogic perspective. His books on yoga, synthesis of yoga, and his letters on yoga to his disciples, and all of this is a rich knowledge. But Sri Aurobindo cannot be isolated and said he's only talking about yoga. He's talking about all life. He was always immersed with every aspect of life, and he was somebody who was a rishi of highest order, who was kind of poised and located at a heights of consciousness which has a very broad, vast vision of things, right? So given the current one of the crises that we can look at is geopolitical crisis, or the crisis of The societies right now, we just finished, say, uh, US elections, US being a very powerful nation. So let us take the aspect of multiculturalism, which had become so strong in its discourse during this election. And it was always about immigration, it was always about the right process and all of that. uh, so in those days, before the multiculturalism as a word that emerged into the picture, what was it was it was more popularly known as internationalism during Aurobindo days. So now we are talking about just quick post World War scenario, like very close to the World War scenarios. So he takes up this aspect of internationalism and he says that it is product of an European mind, right? And what is its aspiration primarily? So we are looking at how he is analyzing this aspect from his perspective. And so it is a product of an European mind, and its aspiration is idea of humanity as a single race of beings with common life and instincts. So after being racially unique, after being culturally unique collectives as human systems and societies, somewhere in probably 18th 19th century we would have this emergence, or even 17th century onwards, from the French Revolution and Renaissance and all of that. um, so you have the influencers of the French thought, you have the influencers of the German thought, you would have the influencers of the Russian thought, leaders, and many of them contributing to a very rational approach of looking at the human systems and the societies collectively. And there they come up with the need for internationalism. And this is an idea, this is an aspiration, which is talking about idea of humanity as a single race of beings with common life and instincts. Now, this is its aspiration. What is it fighting against? Because any new idea that is coming, it has to take its place, then it has to displace that is already existing. So it wants to destroy any idea which is oriented towards nationalism or nationalistic idea. This is where the word nationalism started obviously being ascribed a very negative connotation in the context of internationalism. And why this internationalism is extremely current force even now as we discuss. This is so the whole deep state and all these phrases that we use currently are very intricately connected with this, right? So it wants to destroy the idea of nationalism. It wants to destroy this idea of unique cultures or anything, because the way it presents itself is idea of humanity as a single race. It is not like multiple races, and then it is trying to aspire to effect a larger synthesis of mankind. That is its articulation. Sounds very noble and good, surely. However, it wants to do it by abolishing uh, wars between the classes, wars between creeds, and wars between cultures, wars between, so all sort of barbarism or all sort of barbaric expression that was prevalent, or crusades or whatever you want to call it. It wants to abolish all of that or overcome the grip of all of that. That is its main aspiration, the internationalism. So it also wants to erase the past clearly. Like its inner aspiration is constantly to not be in the grip of the past. And that's why you would see its critique is very strong against the traditions and all of that, no matter how much a superficial lip service it intends to provide empathetically. But it has this particular idea of internationalism, which can be now looked at it as multiculturalism in a way. Though it says multiculturalism is encouraging, because it is just a twist to internationalism, because the culture is still valid. So therefore they want to accommodate all cultures, with their own uniqueness. But at the end of the day, the challenge is with the past, and they don't want any kind of inheritance of the past ideas. That's stupid, right? Because when we look at it from the karmic perspective, you are inevitably inheriting the past. There is no way that you can cut it. So it's extremely important to keep this in mind. But nevertheless, it's a noble goal, because its goal is not just about cutting from the past. It is the means. But its essential goal is to unite the humankind and the mankind in a way. It's a futurist in vision. That's the reason it's not past oriented. It's futurist in vision. And So it has uh, in its core a conception of a human who is very intelligent and ethical being, who is not vulnerable to prejudices in a way. So, and it really envisions human unity. Now, all this is great, but when this idea emerges, who are its allies? Who are its allies who are willing to support this? And these ideas were trying to ally with or find an alliance and affiliation with existing forces of, Sri Aurobindo says, socialism and anarchy, right? Um, so anarchy is kind of inbuilt necessity into introducing this idea of internationalism, and you wouldn't be surprised it is the case with even multiculturalism, that wherever this aspect of currently the hot debates of immigration and all of that comes, it is basically an influx of so to say foreign culture into a particular piece of land or territorial aspect of the nationalistic space. And and there is a big mayhem and crisis all the time, whether to integrate, how to integrate, can we integrate or not, and the politics is always around this, right? So this is a big thing. So anarchic forces always are of a greater affiliation to this idea. Now, how Sri Aurobindo decodes this further is it is an idea, right? It is an idea and it is an abstraction, and any idea can find its grounding only when it is admitted by life and the vitality. So you can sit and think about all utopic ideas or all kind of blissful ideas, even spiritually, so to say. But if your body and life and your prana and your willpower is not there to dynamize it and actualize it, and there is no collaboration between both, then it's never going to be a fruition of an idea. So human progress, and Sri Aurobindo uses this beautiful phrase. He says this: human progress has been always tormented because of this, because we have brilliant ideas, so is tormented due to partial, inconclusive, and unreal admission of ideas. So an idea emerges and it tries to force itself into the life domain of life and vitality and dynamism, but its admission is partial, its acceptance is partial, its expression is partial, the whole process of transition is inconclusive, and it's also in a way unreal many times, and this leads to uh, uh, you know not say no fruition of an idea in that way. So this has happened time and again, and we have also accumulated this over a part. So we have accumulated not just when we say past problems, what we have accumulated is past impartial admissions of greater aspirations, which have resulted in a lot of distress in the human collective, and we have inherited all of that, right? And so when this idea of internationalism appeared on the board and it looked very, very attractive and all of that, when it was facing a sudden adversity which is of a very phenomenal nature, which is war, say Hitler comes and he says, just move, this is not this is not what I am up to, and he's so vehement, he is like he has this titanic force in him, and but he is subscribing or projecting the ideas of nationalism, obviously, and racial superiority and all of that, which is kind of an antithesis to internationalism. And so he just wipes out the societies which are trying to subscribe to these ideas, because these ideas leave these societies very defenseless at the same time from a titanic force such as this, which has now come into picture. So the test of an idea is obviously in its strength is how good when it comes and when it faces the adversity, right? However, after this kind of a situation, Sri Aurobindo says that increasingly the human societies and human systems have still the conditions and tendencies inherent in them which are favoring this idea, right? And here he gives a great priority to science, how science has this tendency to be very universal in its appeal and nature. because no scientific idea is a national idea. It's not an idea of a nation or a culture, at least the way science provides it. So some of the favorable factors to this that are still prevalent in the society, what Sri Aurobindo says is, one is drawing closer to the international life. There is an increasing exposure to the multicultures and people getting to stay, the diasporas, and new cultural memories being embedded. So there is this sort of an internationalism of international life, and you would see a lot of globe-trotting corporate individuals and institutions like corporates, which are multinational in nature, provide for this exposure to the internationalism. All of this is there already. So Sri Aurobindo, way back, before even the capitalist efflorescence into the corporatism or multinational companies, he was already alluding to this. And then he's talking about increase in the communication and contact. Simply, he's already anticipating, and he's indicating at more and more sophisticated ways and means of communication that are transpiring, that are going to lead to this more favorable to the internationalism because of mutual exposure. And this is also resulting in rich exchange about each other's culture and understanding, some sort of an awareness, mutual awareness about each other's cultures and understanding, right? And then he's also talking about community in thought. So there is a thought level, there is an idea level community. It's not anymore just cultural in nature, right? So an idea is proposed, say, let's say an idea of free speech, and an idea of overcoming an oppressed situation, overcoming the tyranny and distressful circumstances. And these are all ideas where there is sort of mutual sharing across the national boundaries. So collaborations happen on those basis, and then there is knowledge and science, which, as I have already highlighted, that Sri Aurobindo highlights. These are all contributing factors and favorable factors for the internationalism, and so to say even multiculturalism that is as it is unfolding right now, right? So the idea has not gone away anywhere. It's going to persist. It's going to try to come and take its grip in the life and the vitality of life at the same time. So he also alludes to religion of humanity that has emerged as humanism, let's say, in 18th, 19th century, and that's yet another European idea. It kind of emerged as, Sri Aurobindo uses a beautiful phrase called, it's an idea that is a Manasaputra of rationalist thinkers as a substitute to Christianity, certain aspects of Christianity, because they understood the power of the religion, or no matter what. So the religious orientation, the ism has to be there. A central idea has to be like consecrated, made sacred, and everybody has to worship that aspect. So the religious fervor has to be brought. So this is actually bringing the vitality, right? The faith and all of that belongs to the vital forces, the vital plane. And this is an idea of humanism turning into a religion as a substitute for all the older religions. But it's all again emerging from Eurocentric view, obviously, because there is no exposure to the nuance of the Sanatana Dharma, at least from our Bharatiya culture perspective. So the fundamental idea here of the religion of humanity is that mankind is the Godhead. Mankind is the Godhead that needs to be worshipped, and progress of human being, that should be the chief aim and the duty of all of the collective. So it's a very collectivist, aspirational goal, this particular idea. And this is very much, so much like a twin with internationalism, this particular idea, or probably even the predecessor of the internationalism in a way. And so the whole idea, the concepts such as humanitarianism or humanitarianism, philanthropy, democracy, socialism, pacifism, all of this comes from this. But like the religions which are based on the vitalistic movements of the faith and all of that, if the religion doesn't have the nuance and sophistication, can be easily grasped by the prejudices of the dogmatism. Sri Aurobindo recognizes the dogmatism of humanism. He clearly articulates already humanism. So he says science, even it is modern, should not make claims contrary to the temperament of this idea. It should not make contrary claims which are ethically not aligned, temperamentally not aligned to this idea. So science is valuable, he says, only as far as it serves through its knowledge progress of religion of humanity. And so that is how you would see even in the current crisis, when we are articulating all of this, the amount of subjectivism that is coming into the picture, that there is a head-on collision from the emergence of ideas which are in collision with the scientific view of rational thinking, and asking science to be subservient to their preferred temperament and ethical values, and science is obliging. That is the most distressful aspect. Science, which was like the beacon of the rationality, beacon of neutrality, beacon of the truth speaker, beacon of something that is going to be speaking everything, as the discovery, is being subjected and is being limited, is being curtailed. And this Sri Aurobindo wrote way back, but what we are experiencing right now is exactly that. And there you can easily see the rooted connections. It is just that these things don't vanish. Just because capitalism came, just because some sort of efflorescence of science has happened, and there is some sort of blossoming of science, and we have made some great scientific progresses, but it gradually comes back and holds its grip and can take even the most powerful of forces, like such as science, and make it subservient to its own cause. However, Sri Aurobindo is not putting the religion of humanity only in such a very negative frame, because Sri Aurobindo, being Sri Aurobindo, he says that you should always admit, when you have admitted a particular idea, it is intellectually imperative to admit a contrary idea to it and see the validity in terms of what is the superiority in terms of where is the sense of consciousness and where is it coming from, what is the heights from it's coming from. So that's why the higher aspect is very important. So now, when I have said that Sri Aurobindo's view not only takes inner and outer aspect, which we will come to, but he is saying that an idea which is higher in its ground, higher in its inspiration, higher in its intuition, has to be necessarily admitted by the lower for its dynamism. But lower is filled with dogmatism, prejudices in its natural ignorant state, which we call avidya. This higher and lower, from Sri Aurobindo's perspective, is nothing but higher is vidya, lower is avidya, lower prakriti and higher prakriti. He keeps using this again and again. And he understands the processes of life very clearly, that it is always the higher trying to manifest in the lower. Lower is admitting it partially, or when he says partial admission or reluctant admission, is also meaning corruption. So a beautiful idea such as compassion and empathy can be poured into the lower vessel, which is so contaminated by its own prejudices, and it corrupts immediately the aspects of empathy, right? And so that's what happens. And that's what he exactly says here, that the principal enemy of religion of humanity is the principal enemy of all religious thought for ancient times, and that is ego. So that is always the reason that the centrality of any religious thought is to make your ego subservient to sacred, primarily, whatever is your notion of sacred. But the success rates are not always high in terms of it, because ego is so subtle and it has its ability to corrupt both at individual and collective level in no time. So he gives an example that how ego can corrupt, say, ego and bring forward egotistic expressions. So whereas love for mankind and real unity cannot be achieved if this overcoming of ego doesn't happen, and he invokes a phrases from say Vedas like Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, where we are praying for the whole of the lokas, different worlds and mankind at large, and we are seeking for real unity in the perspective. That, he says, requires tremendous amount of psychological change and transformation. And a purely intellectual religion cannot achieve this psychological transformation. And that is his thing. And because religion of humanity is essentially a product of rationalist thinkers, that's where he identifies the problem, and also he identifies the key. He says Sri Aurobindo identifies liberty, equality, and fraternity as the are the only, with this kind of a religion of humanity, they are only outward expressions. There is no inner basis to this. They do not succeed in establishing inner basis for this. And he identifies freedom, swatantra, equality, which is samatva or samata, and brotherhood, which is saubhratritva, right? These are all the words which are nicely articulated right now by multiculturalists, internationalists, the global thinkers who are envisaging the societies without borders and boundaries and humanism and all of that. These are all invoked, which Sri Aurobindo admits, says that these are the three godheads of the soul. But when you actually say the same things in the Sanskrit, you will see a huge difference. What it means, freedom is swatantra, and so equality is samatvam, and brotherhood. And he gives a very clear distinction between an egotistic way of expressing this versus truly expressing this on the basis of inner blossoming and from a spiritual fount, when it is expressed. So the egotistic way turns the freedom into competitive individualism in a way, and turns equality into that of a strife all the time, and it also results in ignoring the variations of the nature. Sri Aurobindo is extremely sensitive to the subtleties and the nuances of the variations in the nature. And when it comes to idea of fraternity or brotherhood or saubhratritva, he says that the egotistic perspective can result in maximum, it can result in notions such as equal distribution of labor, consumption, enjoyment, which is very, very, very much like this Marxist thought, right, in a way. And that is just the outer form of it. It doesn't really have an inner basis because there is no true transformation that is happening at a psychological level. So psychological level becomes a very, very foundational idea at this time. So, but if you were to look at it from an inner perspective and how we articulate it from, say, our own wisdom, from Sanatana Dharma, and as Sri Aurobindo would put it in his own integral view, he would first say the basis for such kind of a human unity is possible when there is only true brotherhood or saubhratritva. That has to be the basis. But the true brotherhood, which is so most important for collective, can happen when there is allowance for, say, in the form of freedom. It is not competitive individualism, but it's commitment to self-development, true blossoming of an individual, right? If that is not given, that is constrained, that results in corruption of the idea. And he says, what is this self-development? He says, self-development of divine in human. This is the inner shift that Sri Aurobindo's integral view is presenting. So this should be the aspiration for true freedom. Swatantra is when the divine grows in you. Even from a Shakta perspective, we call Mother Swatantra Shakti. Because the one who is not dependent on anything, Swatantra means there is no dependency. If I have to drink Tea, I have to make tea, pour in the cup, and then partake it. And so I'm depending on a whole lot of things, not only process my my uh, indriyas, and as well as but Divine Mother as a Shakti is a Swatantra. You know, she just partakes. So how this is for us to conceptualize, but that is one of the very pinnacle expressions of Swatantra. This is what Shiva is for us. This is what the Atman is. This is what Brahman is. And the idea of these aspects which are inherent. Now just look at it. He's talking about self-development of divine in human. Now juxtapose this with the theologies which this religion of humanity is fighting. Obviously it is fighting with the theologies because there is no possibility of admission of divinity within the human realm. Human can always be subservient. The nature and the God is always separate. So God cannot be admitted into the realms of the nature, though he is the creator who is sitting mystically in some place and doing all of this. So a gulf has been created so indomitable through certain dominant theologies that this cannot be. When we conceptualize a possibility of development of the divine in the man or in the human, that becomes problematic. Whereas the Sanatana Dharmic and integral view says that that is the foundation. And then you have the equality, the aspect of equality is not, India is not averse to it. Bharata is not averse to the aspect of equality, because its true equality and its articulation has always been in the sense of same soul and the same Godhead in all human beings. This has been its aspiration and its goal and its articulation all the time. Whether it managed to have a vyavastha or a collective successful in reflection with this aspiration and goal, that is always debatable, right? There could have been certain phases where there was this blossoming of this. There could have been always phases, because always a greater idea has to be supported by the lower life, and for that lower life has to be prepared very well and then received. The greater idea has to receive, and therefore in the manifestation there could be challenges. And so therefore telling, oh, but look at India and it has its own challenges, of course that's fine, but look at the idea itself, look at the epistemic solution that we are providing, that at least provides a great amount of possibility and potentiality of the transformation, right? As opposed to no admission theologically, or the superficial external rationalistic expressions of, say, something like religion of humanity, which is only setting up systems and processes, but there is no vitality, there is no soul in it in its own sense. So these are the two of the aspects of religion of humanity that, as he expounds, as well as the internationalism as he is delineating. But if you can actually see from where he has analyzed, he has now gradually arrived at two things. One is the lower adhara has to receive very well a higher idea for any sort of a transformation to happen. If that basis is not created, it is never likely to manifest beautifully. Second, it has to be grounded from inner to outer. The transformation cannot be outer processes and systems and all of that, change the culture, wipe out the differences, force fit some sort of uniformity, and then try and ask the individual nature to blossom. So there are many other brilliant ideas that Sri Aurobindo proposes, that of nation soul, where he is able to meaningfully marry the both individual and collective aspirations, and where he equates even a nation or a race or a community as nothing but like an individual who not only is just an aggregate and he's part of an aggregate. Individual is not just a part of an aggregate, but individual has his his or her own unique reality, and that they are trying to do the self-finding through the process, and this to express itself, and that's what enriches the whole of creation. The same thing with the nations. He says that each nation has its own aesthetic temperament, own ethical temperament, unique aspects that territorially that really nourish and support this uniqueness. And the journey of the nations, journey of the races, journey of humanity has been constant self-finding, and also a lot of challenges and the problems in this soul journey, because something like ego can easily corrupt, both at individual and collective level. So these are the broad aspects. So now when we look at meta-crisis, it's good to say there is a lot of accumulation. There is sort of an integration of many crises of spiritual, psychological, technological, geopolitical, environmental, governance, economic, and all of this. And now we are feeling the heat of all these multiple crises as one crisis, and which is what is meta, which is fine. They are all interdependent, which is fine. Part and the whole is always bigger in terms of its crisis than the parts and individuals of it. It's fine, but unless we really bring this perspective from an integral perspective of Sri Aurobindo, that there is higher and lower, avidya and vidya, there is a hierarchy, the spiritual has to be the basis, inside out of the transformations, and bring back successfully the notion of sacralization and sacred at the center of life, because life is divine, as Sri Aurobindo says. It's tough to achieve the transformations which will be lasting and sustainable. So that's how I conclude my lecture. Thanks for your patience.